Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. This is the internet's only comedy podcast defending the world from the robots. My name is Alexander Holland. I'm sat here in a beautiful Berlin, Germany, and sat across from me digitally as is every single week. It's got to be the one called
John Maloney.
John Maloney. How are you doing down there in Melbourne, Australia today? Tell us about the vibes on a Saturday night in Melbourne town.
Look, Easter Saturday is one of the days that I really look forward to because Jesus is dead and you can do whatever you want until tomorrow when he wakes up. So I like to get all my naughties out today.
I was saying to people, shout out to my friend Jan, who threw a beautiful spread for a bunch of people for Easter Friday yesterday. Can you remind me, John, what was the order of things? He dies and then he...
What was this guy Jesus about? Well, I'd love to tell you about that, Al.
John the evangelist.
Yeah.
This is like an evangelist Dorothy Dixer. John, can you tell us a little? Well, I've got a question, John. How did Jesus rise from the dead? I'd like to thank the member for Adelaide for his question because I need to evangelize my Lord and Savior Jesus Christi.
I got sent to Canberra once, which is Australia's capital, where the Parliament House is, and I was in Parliament House because I was sent by Christopher Pyne, a former political minister
I think it's,
in Australia.
It's pronounced Pyne.
Christopher Pyne, and he sent me there. And I thought, well, this would be good. It was some sort of student leadership forum, but it was really churchy. And I didn't really pick up on that at the time. And I remember the initial session, they were saying things like, think about heroes. You know, we think about Nelson Mandela, we think about Gandhi. What about this guy? Can anyone tell me who this is? It's Jesus of Nazareth. Yeah. They're just trying to casually edge towards being openly, proselytizing about Christianity.
Did he?
So he died
on the Friday, and they put him in the cave.
I mean, didn't. What really happened is the pagans had some kind of spring festival, and then the Roman Empire went, "How about this one instead?" So, yeah, he died on the let's say it was on the Friday. He gets on the cross. He dies.
Yeah, so he was on the cross for a couple of days. Yeah, was that did it take him days to die? How quickly did he die from being crucified?
No, I think it often did take people to crucifixion victims quite a long time. So he might have been up there for a day. Yeah. Then he dies, and then they put him in a tomb, and then when he dies, according to one of the Gospels at least, there's a big sort of storm indicating that they'd pissed off God, and they put him in a tomb, and then a couple of days went by. Everyone was just having a good time eating heaps of Easter eggs, even though they didn't really know why yet. And and then on the third day, he rose again in accordance with the scriptures. That's what we used to have to say in church. So that they went to the tomb. These women went to the tomb, and they saw that the stone had been rolled aside and that the tomb was empty. And then Jesus came back and said, "How you like these apples? I'm still alive."
Your recollection of that's very good. Do you remember that from?
Yeah.
Do you remember that from school, or did you do a little bit of post-school Christianity study? How do you know? Or am I just a real dumbass? I don't know the
No, I did probably go to church. I went to church, pretty regularly when I was a kid, but always on Easter. And you'd go and hear this story, and you'd hear it on Good Friday, the story of, he goes to Pontius Pilate, and Pontius is like, "I don't know, man. I'm just the I'm just the apparatchik of the Roman
Yeah.
Empire. I don't give a fuck. And then he gets killed. And then also you had the Stations of the Cross to remind you, which were usually emblazoned on church walls. So when I was bored, I would just stare up at those where it's like Jesus goes into goes up and some kind woman rubs his sweat off his brow, and then they, for some reason, stab him and water comes out. It's all kind of odd.
Yeah.
And there's that thing that you love, the meme that you love, where there's a kind of medieval picture of one of the Stations of the Cross where they have what kind of is sometimes known as the Shroud of Turin, because they, apparently discovered it, although clearly that's not the case. But they had this, there's this episode where somebody walks up and wipes his face. And so there's this picture of somebody in the background, Jesus is walking up the hill with the cross and someone in the background with his face on a shroud.
On a towel, basically. Or a piece of
the
material.
Towel. And then the caption is like, shout out to this hustler who's selling merch at the crucifixion.
It pops up a few times a year. Somebody else, shout out to my friend Marky who reposted it on her stories. It is, I think, my favorite meme of all time. It's so layered. And the first time that I saw it, I was almost in tears from laughing. And then I wrote, and then I actually found the guy who initially made it, and I reposted it. And then I said, thank you so much to this person who's absolutely made my life with this meme. And he responded. He responded and said, "Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that."
Wow.
Yeah, it was
bit of reach out hygiene.
Good reach out hygiene. It was a guy he'd posted it originally on Twitter, so he was quite easy. He was quite easy to find. But yeah, I absolutely love that one.
It's a good one. So happy Easter to those celebrating, and to everyone else, happy chocolate weekend.
Yeah. If anybody who's not a Christian, then just get on the chocks and enjoy the holiday.
Yeah, day off work and a mouthful of choc.
Now, John, I've got something really excited that I'm going to say. I'm going to put out there onto you.
Great.
I make a bit of a big deal about the fact that I do not like mindless consumerism. And so to that end, I tend to hang on to pieces of technology for as long as I possibly can, because nothing pisses me off more than companies that try and trick you into thinking that you need the latest version of something. And so we've gone from a people that used to repair our own clothes to a people that buy a new iPhone every single year, which is just madness, particularly in this day and age when the differences between them are not particularly great. So whenever I'm making a new purchase, I have to ask myself, and I would encourage everybody out there, ask yourself the question, do I really need this thing? How much difference is this going to make to my life? Think about the hedonic treadmill. Think about hedonic adaptation. That is the idea that you think that something new in your life will bring you this incredible amount of joy. And typically when you first get it, it does. You have this spike of, this is amazing. So for example, you fantasize about buying a Ferrari. Ever since you're a kid, you've seen them. You just think about them over and over again. You think, man, if I had a Ferrari, my life would just be awesome the whole time. Every time I was in that Ferrari. Yeah. And it is for about the first 3 days of having, you can look at this. This is science. Speak to anyone that knows about science and they will say it's true. It's the hedonic adaptation where no matter how amazing the thing is that you get, once you get it, you pretty quickly get used to it. I don't wonder, actually, it's a good question. I wonder what if there's things that buck hedonic adaptation, but certainly for things like, I don't know. Yeah. I know.
What do they say? I mean, one of the things they talk about is, taking pleasure in the present, which which kind of is a way of, not kind of buying into that hedonic cycle of anticipating something for ages and then you get it and then it seems to lack something, and so your brain goes, oh, that's because now you want this new thing, and you go, okay, yeah. And just, whereas if you perhaps just enjoy the present moment, like again, a nice bar of chocolate in your mouth that you haven't anticipated.
The trick that I often employ is just never look forward to anything. This is I can just encourage anybody out there, just assume that everything's going to be terrible all the time, and then when you just get really basic shit, you're just like, this is incredible. This is just the most amazing thing ever. But so to that end, I famously didn't buy a new phone for many years, and so up until maybe 18 months ago, I was using an Apple iPhone, which was 7 years old, because I refused.
Wow.
I refused to get a new one because
darning it when it broke. You were darning it like an old pair of socks when it would break.
Exactly. And so to that end, I had the same running watch for God knows how long. I think also maybe close to 7 years. I had a Fitbit Generation 1, and it did. I pretty much did what I thought it needed to do. And I've been running more and more and more over the last few years, and I have just kept this same running watch. And I've just thought, oh yeah, it pretty much tells me what my heart rate is. Isn't that all that these things do? And so I didn't want to buy a new one because they're kind of expensive. And then I found that one thing that I really wanted on a running watch recently was the ability to navigate. I wanted to be able to just check my wrist and have it tell me where in the city I needed to run. And so I did tons and tons of research, as I always do with these kinds of things. And I bought a brand new watch. And I'm happy to say, if you want to, again, show sponsors come at us, we're going to be very, very valuable to show sponsors once you eventually see the value and don't praise the machine, because I only talk about products that I actually fall deeply in love with. And once I've fallen deeply in love with the Garmin Forerunner 165 that I bought a couple of weeks ago, this thing has completely changed my life. And when I bought it, I instantly just realized that it was way, way better than I was expecting. And the reason is because I had gone so many generations without updating the technology. So this is the trick, and this is, I think, the problem, that the trap that people fall into these days. People so constantly are buying the newest, latest thing that there just hasn't been enough time from the generation that they owned previously for them to appreciate the new thing. So, for example, everybody famously buys an iPhone every fucking 1, 2, 3 years. It's just not enough time, particularly now. It's just not enough time for there to have been enough developments in the technology that you really appreciate it. So again, I'm giving you Dutch's hot tip here. Just go like 7 or 8 years without getting the latest version of a phone or a watch or any a gaming system, a computer. And when you get the next one, you'll just be like, holy shit, I'm living in the future, right? Like the difference between this thing and my fucking Fitbit generation, I'm discovering all these things that I'm like, I didn't know they had this now. They have this in watches now? This is incredible.
Wow. So it's not a Fitbit, but it's a kind of new generation
it's
equivalent?
a company called Garmin that have been around for many years. Garmin, I think, first got into... I think Garmin were firstly an old school GPS company. You might remember, John, when we were boys. Probably the first time you ever heard somebody say, "Oh, I have this device that shows where I am on a map of the world," and it would move. It would move at about one frame every 30 seconds, and it was like a dot matrix thing. But Garmin were one of the fishing boats and stuff, I think, were some of the first.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And the fishing industry were the first people, I think, to really utilize a lot of GPS technology, triangulating. But I thought you'd also like, I've come up with a very novel expression to help people know to explain to people what you do when you want to just get a piece of technology and you want to wait a long time, and then the sense of joy that is filling up your heart because you've waited so long, and it's very novel. And when people hear it, they're going to go, "Oh, that must be Al talking about the technology from Don't Praise the Machine." And I call it the generation gap.
Yeah, that's that's an interesting expression. I never.
It's when you hear that, you must just think, "Wow, you must
that.
be so. That's so clever. I've never heard that before."
Must have taken you some time. It's a great. I mean, I was talking to someone about an old Nokia. I mean, the other day. Imagine going from what was it, like an 8310 or whatever they used to call the shitty old Nokias to an iPhone, 15. You just kind of think. You would think like feel like I'm in the fucking Star Trek Enterprise, but each year you go, yeah, my camera's a bit better, and also my phone has inexplicably slowed down when the new one came out, so I better just buy a new one.
It's more the joy of your phone not. People just enjoy now that their phone works because the one they had yesterday was so gunked up with
that's right.
with planned obsolescence that they go, oh fucking thank God my bloody iPhone. Have you bought anything recently that is giving you hedonic adaptation vibes where you thought this will make my life much better, and then you bought it and it was good for about an hour, and then you just were like fucking whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very accustomed to that now, and I do the same thing as you. I don't. I try not to look forward to things.
It's a good trick,
and I have very low expectations of everything in my life.
Yeah,
and so I'm quite a miserable person, but I'm also
these little things come up.
Yeah, that's right. But no, I mean, look, the thing that I have been avoiding and had that kind of generation gap experience with recently was text to image AI.
Yeah.
And, because the last time I really used it or investigated it, obviously I was kind of reading stuff. And I think probably 2 years ago or so on the show, we had done this little bit about, the emerging technology of, what was that product that I've now kind of moved away from it, but it's called Crayon. Yeah. But it used to have hang on, it's just gone out of my head, but it used to be called DALL-E Mini, and then they changed it slightly, but all that's still around, but obviously it's updated since those days. I mean, it was already starting to impress me because, of course, you're comparing it to what comes before. So 2 years ago, I was using it and typing in things like "Don't Praise the Machine" and typing in episode titles and seeing what it would come up with, or typing in other more coherent phrases and seeing what it came up with. And it was okay. Sometimes it would get something right in a way that was surprisingly good, and you could sort of see that it had potential, and it was amazing because there was nothing like it. There hadn't been anything like it up until that point. But then I kind of left it for all but, the better part of probably 12 to 18 months, which was an eternity in AI time. It's like going from the iPhone 1 to the iPhone 15. And then because I've been helping with these thumbnails for our YouTube releases of Don't Praise the Machine, one of the shout out to Canva. I'd love for them to sponsor the show.
Great Australian company.
Product.
Canva.
And I love that. I bloody love Canva.
Fucking oath.
I've rooting
Garmin,
around in
Canva,
there.
Come at us.
Yeah, come at us.
We should get the Canva team as our first guests on Don't Praise the Machine.
Totally.
Pay for me to fly to Perth, guys, so we can Canva.
Yeah. That'd be great. We'll go do some open air recording of Cottesloe Beach. We can go bodyboarding and then have an interview with the makers of Canva.
We can take a bunch of photos with us with the quackers on Roto.
With West Coast Eagles legend Mick Malthouse and the Quackers.
Sorry to just digress, but I mean, again, I think there's just there just are products that you just so many products are shit, and then there's products that you just go, this is fucking amazing. Yeah. And Canva is one of those things that I think when people first get their hands on it and they start using it, you get your head around it, and you're able to just express these ideas that people just would not have the patience for in Photoshop generally, and you just go,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
It's so good. I mean, when you first introduced me to it and I was kind of experimenting with it, and then I'd finish a thumbnail and send it to you, but then I just would spend another hour just mucking around seeing what I could make with it, because it's really one of those things where you feel as though these possibilities are opening up, where you go, oh, yeah, there's all kinds of weird scenes that I could create here, or weird effects. And, using one of those things was this kind of embedded AI software that they have. I think it's just called Magic AI, but it's something you can use while you're in Canva. So some of our YouTube thummies have, backgrounds or characters in them that I've just created through using AI. And then I just started rooting around with it. And I recently, last week, when I was making the thumbnail for the show, realized that it said you can't do this again until the 1st of April now. And I thought, I didn't realize there was a limit because we've got a subscription. Yeah. But the limit was like 500 AI generated images in a month.
I never reached that.
No, and I just went down such a rabbit hole that they were like, you're banned until April from using this. Because I was literally, the couple of days where I woke up and I was like, oh, I kind of want to use the text-to-image AI. It was a bit like when you first get it reminded me of when I was a kid and like Windows 95 came out and there were all these advanced computer games. Or like the first time I had used a bulletin board system or connected with my friends to play Duke Nukem 3D or something. It's that kind of excitement of I'm breaking into something that seems so novel. And maybe if I'd followed it along for those 18 months, it wouldn't seem that way. But I was just like, it had gone from producing these sort of pretty crummy, sometimes okay images to just making stuff that just blew my mind, and so quickly and so limitless that it became sort of intoxicating, because you go, okay, I'm going to give you something that I can barely, I couldn't think how to even create this image myself. I'd be like, there are two nuns and they're standing next to a Olympic-sized swimming pool that's full of giant worms or something.
just for anybody who's not maybe for Marie and Stephen, my parents, you basically just type a line of text into this thing. You tell it, this is the image that I want you to create, and you literally just type in. So maybe you could share some of your prompts with us, John.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm going to log in now and see what I've done, what sort of things I've done, and maybe try and... And so often what I'll do is I'll start with an image.
What sort of sins I've committed here.
Oh, God, it's so nutty. So like one of them that I can see here is a swimming pool, outdoor swimming pool.
Yeah.
In a kind of suburban setting. So you can see the pool, you can see this kind of house and garden in the background. Next to the pool, there are these, like I was saying, these giant worms.
What might you have typed in here?
Yeah, I might have typed in swimming pool full of giant worms, and it's just kind of done that. It's put them next to the swimming pool. And then I've said, in the swimming pool, there is a bearded Orthodox priest. And so it's done that. It's just put this man in the pool, and he's kind of looking out quizzically at these giant worms on the side of the pool. And then I've done a series of images because I wanted to check its kind of capacity to do pretty standard images, like a scary clown in a cornfield. So there's that kind of stuff. But then I was like, there's a farmer in a cornfield at night. He is also an axolotl and he's very hungry. So there's a guy in sort of farmer's overalls in this dark cornfield, but he's got like an axolotl face. It looks really unsettling. Then there's like an old woman lost in because I was getting into this kind of its capacity to produce haunting images. Yeah. And one thing that people have started to comment on is its capacity to, because it doesn't make semantic connections in the same way that we do, but it gets very close, what you end up with is something that looks uncannily like an image from a dream that you might be able to remember. And that's what makes it so haunting, because there'll be something wrong with the image. Like somebody will have too many fingers, or their legs will be like out of place, or that, you know, the proportions in the background will be warped, or their facial expression won't make any sense given the circumstances. But in those respects, it's very much like your brain, when you're asleep, trying to kind of recreate a narrative. And so it creates this real sort of skin crawly but fascinating uncanny valley situation. So another one of these images next to the axolotl farmer is this old woman who's looking sort of confused, walking through the desert. And on one of the dunes in the distance, there's what looks like a wave of blood, and then there's like a shadowy figure in the background, and it's just like, oh fuck, what is this? Very nightmarish. And I don't even know, I'm not sure now what I would have typed in to get that sort of prompt. But then I've done things like, you know, here's one which is a bunch of Celtic warriors who are sort of like looking like pallbearers, except the pall that they're bearing is just a tray of cronuts. So that's quite a good one. And then I've done Salvador Dali serving crepes in a swamp, and it looks just extremely photorealistic. Then I've kind of got into historical figures. So I've done like a bunch with Winston Churchill where he's riding a baboon through the streets of London. And again, it just looks amazingly realistic. One where he's riding on a giant kangaroo in the outback. And then I did one where I said, you know, instead of making it photorealistic, make it a lithograph of like a kind of medieval manuscript-looking image of Henry VIII riding a kangaroo into battle. And it's incredibly good. I mean, it looks like a sort of medieval version of a kangaroo with this guy in medieval garb on top of it in a battle scene. Then what have I got? This image of Henry Kissinger, who with a giant toad on his desk. It looks great. Coupled with Abraham Lincoln shaking hands with a giant tardigrade, which I like.
We'll have all these on the YouTube channel for anybody who wants to. Yeah, these will be coming up on screen. I just mine, John, I was just doing several versions of the same prompt to try and get the most disturbing images. Which I just for weeks was just putting boy being fed by his mother plate of rats. And so I have like hundreds of photographs of like children being fed rats by their mother with various facial expressions, and they are great. I think the other thing that makes everything slightly more disturbing than you might otherwise think. I mean, it's one thing to have a human create a disturbing, dream-like, nightmarish image. You go, yeah, that's from Barry's imagination. It's terrifying, but it's fine. It's from Barry. But now we have machines making us nightmare images that look like our nightmares are coming from machines.
Yeah. It's quite, I mean, I was, like a lot of new technologies, you feel this sense of excitement but tinged with concern because you're like, I'm not sure this is a good thing. But partly because as I was using it, you know, you just think, how novel is it that I can think of this thing that I can barely even put into words? It's such a weird thing because I was really testing it to create images of some very strange scenarios. And then it would do it, and then I'd add a layer of strangeness, you know. And so I would have trouble even imagining what would come out. And then you type it, this weird thing, you know, an Orthodox priest standing in a pool with giant worms, right? You might have that as a weird dream. And then seconds after you've typed it, it's there. It's an image. And I started to feel like, you know, my mind was getting slightly, like there was something cognitively unhealthy about saying these very weird things and then seeing them immediately. It was like simulating having kind of psychosis. It was so weird. And then I thought, like, if I was slightly stoned and doing this, I would freak myself out. Like it's just a bit unsettling. And you kind of get addicted to this endless sense of possibility. You think, like, what's the weirdest thing I can come up with? And then I'm going to make it a bit weirder, and then I'm going to put it.
Of course,
here,
the other thing is that at the moment there are all these guardrails on this technology.
Yeah.
You can't just put in whatever you want at the moment, but undoubtedly
can't do.
I mean, it's
and as well as I do that I tried to find and manipulate, as I did with ChatGPT. I love finding those guardrails, particularly with this magic AI. There was stuff around. There were obviously some guardrails around nudity and it's kind of vulgar images.
And celebrities often as well. Like if you if you tell it that you want it to make you celebrities and trademarks, because I think I think you'd said to it make a Mr. Peanut, and I think it even struggled with that probably because it
produced a weird version
because
off-brand
Mr. Peanut. But historically,
and I found it did dead celebrities.
Yeah, okay.
So I could say put Sophia Loren or Salvador Dali or whatever. But if I said, give me Mark Wahlberg getting eaten by a dragon, it would go, no, I'm not doing that. And then there are ways that you can go, like, okay, I want this person to be covered by splashes of red, and then it like just basically looks like blood. But if you tell it to do blood, it'll go no. Or you say, okay, I want a woman who is wearing translucent body paint or something, and maybe it'll give you something a bit closer to nudity than it otherwise would. This is why I got to the end of my 500 images and it said, get out, you have to have a break. It's like using a card to gamble at the casino, and then it goes, you've been doing this for 12 hours. Do you maybe speak to one of our staff, have a piece of pie and a coffee? So yeah, that was definitely a moment of wonder that of the kind that I probably have not experienced from technology in years. I think.
And of course, John, the next step that's already here, but we don't have access to, but will very soon, they tell us, is OpenAI's Sora project, which does exactly what you're doing, but in video form.
Yeah. Oh, God, what kind of strange future awaits?
When are we going to get our hands on Sora? Have you seen that for anybody who hasn't seen, Sora by OpenAI is the equivalent of what John has just been talking about, but instead of still images, it's video images. So you can tell it, make me a 1-minute scene of a couple walking through a street in Kyoto and there's cherry blossoms everywhere, and the camera pans in and sweeps down, and I want it to be in the style of Francis Ford Coppola from this particular film, and then it will go bleep, 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 blop, blop, bleep, and just give you something that looks photorealistic. And then you go, what have we done?
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking when I was watching Poor Things, which I know you've also seen, and which has some wonderful design characteristics, that I wondered if some of the designs might have come from that kind of, technology, because obviously the possibilities in terms of producing concept art, etc., and people who enjoy our newsletter will know that I did a kind of experiment with this, with the Entre Placard or Purgatorium that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, just applying various different conceptual overlays to it. So you go like, put it in black and white in a sort of rural background and this kind of atmosphere and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you could just do that sort of stuff in seconds, where previously there was no alternative, I guess, but to get a human to do it.
I think a lot of people at the moment, I think, are under the illusion that even though this technology makes things a bit easier, I think people are still kind of under the illusion that, people will still want something that has a certain realness to it. So I'm sure that all of these kind of industries that are currently threatened by this technology, like say, for example, special effects or just the film industry in general, or product photography or fashion photography. They think, oh well, people will want something real. I think what people don't understand is the cost effectiveness of this technology versus having to do something in the real world. And if you think about, for example, how much it would cost if you are a fashion brand, for example, and you are doing fashion photography, and perhaps you have to do things on location, or even just films. If you have to do anything on location, the amount of cost and logistics and time involved in like creating this environment for your film or product photography or fashion shoot, it's like an astronomical amount of manpower and money. Sometimes like if you're talking about sort of small scale things, it's like thousands of dollars. Then it gets up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you're talking about films, it's like millions of dollars. So suddenly people are going to be having these discussions where they go, okay, well, we could spend millions of dollars and have this thing take us, months to years, or it could we could pay like a €15 a month subscription to Midjourney, and we could just have somebody do it in the computer right now for €15, and it's done. So obviously, this is what's going to happen. The pace of it is going to be the question. I think that the pace at which, I think I'm of the opinion. It's not entirely my opinion. I think a lot of this AI technology is actually starting to affect industries more right now than people are aware of. I think that there are a number of layoffs that are happening that are because people are starting to realize that they can use certain technologies to take over the roles that were previously occupied by real humans. It's the kind of thing that's obvious, but I think at the moment people still sort of think, if you're a bit of a lay person, if you're not in the tech world, I think people kind of think, this is kind of coming at some point. I don't think people realize that a lot of layoffs that are happening at the moment is because it is happening right now.
Yeah. And even if those companies, they might have a way of doing things that they're happy to just carry on with out of inertia, but as soon as they get the squeeze, if they think, we need to think about how we can save money, then they're going to make that transition because it's just blindingly obvious. And there might be a argument about, well, is this slightly worse than what a human is producing? I don't even know if you could say that it is. It's probably better. But even if you felt that way, you think, well, this is just a fraction of the cost. So, of course, we're going to do that. And, I don't know. Looking at some of these images, I'm almost scared of what I've been able to create as a slightly disturbed layperson.
You won't be able to do, John, is you won't be able to make this podcast with these two fellows just talking back at one another. You're not going to get this authenticity from
you can't. You can't get it, at least at this stage. Maybe in another 2 years, sure, but not.
Speaking of technology and the way that it's taken jobs, John, what's your opinion on the self-checkout at supermarkets? This is a thing that's very popular in the United States, in Australia. It hasn't been anywhere near as well, and the UK as well. When I lived in London, they were already there. This was like 10 years ago. But the uptake of them has been much slower in Germany. I'm only starting to see them in German supermarkets now on a larger scale. What's your personal opinion on the self-check? So here's a question for you. You got the self-checkout. You got a checkout that's manned by a human with no line. She's just standing there, or he.
Yeah.
Where do you go?
Depends how many items I've got. If I've just got one, I might try and go through the self-checkout. But if I've got a bunch of groceries, I'll go with the human because I like somebody else to do my bagging for me.
Yeah.
And
this is,
and also because very often I'll just go, oh, there'll be some fucking problem. Unexpected
Yes.
item in bagging area. And I'll go, oh, fuck's sake. And then some guy comes over and, puts in a code. And then you go, I don't know, like this is a asparagus. Is it a this asparagus
Yeah.
or that asparagus? It doesn't actually, I think it's there for the benefit of the supermarket more than my benefit as a consumer. So if given the option, I'll generally get a person to do it. And I like, bit of how's your day, a bit of what have you been up to, what are you doing, when do you finish, when do you knock off, do you want to come to the pub, that sort of stuff.
Do you want to come to my place? When you knock off, do you want to come to my house? It's just going to be me.
Do you like asparagus? I could make us something.
Which of these items do you like? I could cook something up for us.
So why is it not? I mean, I don't know what it is about Australia. We just love robotizing.
I think Australia, the US, and the UK, I think have taken them up a lot. And the reason that I was thinking about them this week is because I was at my local Rewe, which is a supermarket chain in Germany, and they had not only had they recently implemented self-checkouts where you can check out your own groceries without having to talk to a human at the human checkout, scan and bag your own groceries. But they had this other new system where they had these devices at the front of the store, and I had to read about what it was. And it's essentially like a barcoding gun. And what they're saying to you is you take the barcoding gun, you take your basket or your trolley, and rather than scanning all of the items when you leave the supermarket, you actually scan them as you take them off the shelves and put them into your shopping trolley. So as you walk around the supermarket, you're going beep, beep. And so that way, when you get to the self-checkout counter, all you do is basically tell it, just read my gun, and then you can just, I guess then you can.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I guess you still have to bag things up, or you could be bagging them up as you put them in. You could have your bags ready in the shopping trolley, and then, so it's just a one-step process at the end of the shopping experience where you just say, read my gun, and then you can walk out with all of your items. And Amazon famously have a technology where they set up their own supermarket as a test, I think more so for the media. I'm not sure if it's actually functioning, but rather than having a self-checkout or having a scanning gun, they've implemented a bunch of secret technologies where you're able to just take items off the shelf in the supermarket. So you just grab your milk, you grab your cereal, you grab your bread and eggs, you just put them in the trolley and you literally just walk out. And it knows, obviously you're pre-registered somehow. So, it knows, oh, this is Alex. I mean, in the future, I'm sure you'll just have you'll just have Amazon on your phone.
Chip.
You walk into the store, it knows, oh, Alex has just walked into the store, and then grab all your items, put them in the shopping trolley. It's got all these technologies that watch you like a hawk. You walk out. There is no, I mean, imagine, again, this is interesting to think about how we can reimagine these spaces with technology. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's great that there's not going to be any checkouts, but I'm saying if you think about the amount of space that checkouts take up and what that looks like in a supermarket, you imagine maybe what a supermarket would look like if you don't need that. So it's literally just the items. You could potentially have them ordered in a different way as well. So you just walk into the supermarket, you just grab shit like you're stealing it, and you just walk. There's no checkout, and you just walk out, and it knows every single item that you've taken. And when Amazon invited journalists to do this, they encouraged the journalists to try and steal items. So they said, we won't tell you how we are monitoring the items that you're taking off. So what we want you to do is try and trick the system. Try and guess how we're monitoring you, and then try and find a workaround so that you don't get charged for the steak. Maybe put your hand over the barcode. Maybe maybe raise your jacket as you lean over the meat shelf because maybe you think a camera is watching you that you can trick. And I think from memory that nobody was able to steal anything. It knew every single item that was being taken. But yes, I digress. So apparently the self-checkouts in some places around in the UK and the US are being rolled back, and it's interesting to read some of the reasons for this. So Booths, which is an upmarket supermarket chain in the UK, announced recently that they were removing all self-checkouts in all but 2 of its 28 stores in the UK, and also in the US. Walmart and Costco and other companies are also rethinking the self-checkouts.
Wow.
And I think the PR teams from these supermarket chains and department stores is, some bullshit about how people miss the human interaction and all this kind of stuff. But there's another alarming statistic for shareholders of these particular companies, and that is that according to one US poll conducted, I think they interviewed 2,000 people who use self-checkouts, and 15% of respondents admitted to stealing items using the self-checkouts. John, as a high-profile lawyer and teacher, will you now admit to stealing items at the self-checkout?
As somebody with a legal practicing certificate, which needs to be renewed in a couple of months, have you committed any offense?
Let me just tell you some of the ways that people do.
Of course I haven't.
So of course there is the just put an item in your basket without scanning it, and then there's other common tactics which are also stealing, just FYI, but they might seem less so. So
You're not. Can I guess one?
Please.
One of them that I've heard of a lot.
that I've heard of every time I go to the supermarket.
Yeah, exactly. Is you go, well, these are heirloom tomatoes that I've got but I'm just going to put them through as classic bargain basement tomatoes. Correct. Save myself 30 cents.
Correct. So scanning fruit and veg and then putting through the cheaper fruit or veg when in fact you had selected the more luxurious one. That's a common one. People even take it to the next level where you might swap like a banana barcode, or maybe bananas maybe not a good idea and maybe not a good example, but you take like a steak and maybe you bring up the steak to the machine and then you just sort of gently swipe through like the barcode of like a can of tinned tomato soup, and then you just put them both. Put them both in the grocery bag at once. So if anybody was watching you, it would look like you were swiping past the steak. Machine beeps, but instead of $20 steak, it's 50-cent tomato soup. And then one that I hadn't heard of, which I thought, wow, this is a great idea. I'm going to have to try that this week. Is apparently people print their own barcodes off at home.
Oh, that's
and
clever.
Then bring them into the store, and then they have this collection of like their own barcodes that they just scan through. Right.
Yeah, okay.
Which kind of reminded me of the old, clever. the old drill a hole in a coin, tie a bit of string around it, and you get endless pinball because you just put the coin in the machine and then you just use the string to pull it out, like Top Cat used to at the start of the Top Cat cartoon. That's what he would do. But apparently, and by the way, this is called shrink. Stealing is called shrink. So they were saying, that one of the reasons that companies are rethinking the self-checkouts is because basically everybody's fucking shrinking them real hard.
Shrinking it. Yeah, well, I got one thing to say to them. If you don't want to pay 5 people $20 an hour to do it like normal human beings, then fuck you. I'm going to take my heirloom tomatoes.
Yeah. I mean, of course, what's going to happen, obviously, is the Amazon thing is just going to happen where you just won't be able. The technology will be so good that that all the self-checkouts will disappear, it's interesting to think like. Obviously, at the moment, there is also a lot of people now who have switched entirely to getting their groceries delivered. I have a friend who just said, I hate going to the supermarket. I find it a very unpleasant experience. And so I don't go to the supermarket anymore. I buy all of my groceries online and have them delivered. because that's just going to get cheaper too because of either drone technology or self-driving. Self-driving technology that's already on the roads of San Francisco. Imagine how much cheaper it's going to be for an unmanned vehicle to just drive and way faster. Because again, imagine like an Amazon-style warehouse of grocery store supply. So you just be like, oh, I want 10 bananas and I want a packet of ham and I want a carton of milk. And you just go buy and then there's some warehouse, Amazon warehouse with robots that just, as soon as you hit buy, it just goes bang, 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 picks and packs all the items, puts them in an automated vehicle. And then you get a notification on your phone going, Barry the robot's out the front. And it's like fucking 15 minutes later, are you really going to go to drive to a supermarket for that supermarket experience with Kathy, the checkout lady, just so you can have your little discussion about the asparagus?
Yeah, or say, what are you been
What's the weather like? Yeah, it was nice earlier. It was nice earlier. Not nice now. Nah, now's different than before. Yeah, because before it was nice. Yeah, it was nice earlier, wasn't it? Yeah, not like now. Nah, not like now.
It's true. That's about the standard that I've achieved. But I do, it's hard not to feel a bit reactionary and sad about that. I long for the day, though, when I don't even think we need to be eating real bananas. I want to put a VR headset on and I just want a robot to inject me with all the goods from a banana straight into my bloodstream. And I just want to virtually eat a banana in my dreamscape, in my VR dreamscape. And then it says, you have eaten a banana. You will get charged 20 Apple bucks.
Lord Bezos has charged you 5 Roblox credits for that banana. What do you? I mean, you love.
Thank you.
You love Uber, John. You wouldn't want to go back to actual taxis.
That's true. I wouldn't, and I like Uber. I liked Uber. I mean, look, I'm the same as your friend. When you were talking about this, I was thinking about what happens and what I do at the supermarket. And it took me a minute because it's kind of a rare occurrence for me. I had a really nice outing to Sydney Road, which is a kind of busy, lovely street near me. And I went to like a classic old supermarket with all these very local, very good quality produce, very kind of lively and colourful.
For local people.
Exactly. Lots of smells and colours and chat. And I thought, man, this is great. And, I do miss it. But so often convenience wins out. And I just go, please bring me my block of Tony's chocolate and the chocolate. And
I didn't know they had that in Australia as well. They're doing so well. This is a slight digression. There is something about that company that is, I think it's like I think it's independent. And I think it's like linked to a charity or something. I forget what it is. We should do a Tony's chocolate only bit.
Because where's it from? Is it Dutch maybe?
Yeah.
And I know that they have tried to do something which you wouldn't think you needed to do, which was basically to carefully appraise the supply chain to ensure that there was no slavery or other unscrupulous practices.
You're right,
at
John.
any
Dutch
point in the
confectionery
production.
company, it has, and there is something making. Yeah, you're right, John. It's Tony's Chocolate Only, making chocolate 100% exploitation free. But
and I miss the exploitation of Cadbury's or Nestle, but it's delicious. Nonetheless.
But so you were in the supermarket going, this is quaint, but it's just not quaint enough.
Yeah.
Or you thought,
it's
I don't
not
give
quaint.
a... I mean, you thought, this is quaint, but I don't give a fuck about a quaint.
Exactly. I thought I'm not living in fucking Toy Town. This is the future. So sack those people and put in robots.
I must say that whenever anybody says like Uber's shit, Uber's there's a lot of things that Uber's done that aren't great. But I tell you one thing that they have done that is fucking amazing and that is very hard to argue against is when you land in a new country, in a city that you are not familiar with. Back in the day before there was Uber, it was just expected that you were going to either get terribly ripped off by the cab drivers in that particular city, or you'd have to spend like hours bartering and doing all this fucking research to go like, oh, how do I not get ripped off in this cab? And Uber has made it so that that is not a thing anymore. So I myself have landed in countries where previously having to pay like the 10 times tourist tax on a cab, that would have been the case 20 years ago. Now I can land in these countries and in these cities, and it's
the same system as,
and you get charged the same as the locals.
Absolutely. And it's taken out of that. The transaction is taken out of the individual hands. I mean, I'm a heavy user of Ubers. They put me in the marketing material that's distributed.
You're in the
internally,
platinum club.
Probably in the exactly. I'm in the top 10%. I get access to all the best cars, all the best
men,
the best chat. Yeah, that's right. All the best drivers.
Get the best.
I'm like, man, this guy's conversation is fucking
He must have been listening to Don't Praise the Machine. He's just like throwing out really interesting little gambits. They're asking me about what my favorite part of the day has been so far.
Totally. Man, I had this guy the other day, and this is after I went to Uber One, which is the kind of, you pay a monthly fee basically and you get certain benefits. Like you do get access.
I wasn't familiar with this.
So if you're someone like me who uses 6 Ubers a day, you get it's cost effective. And I had this guy straight after I signed up to this thing, and it was great. He told me all about how he'd gone with his British DJ mate to some gig, and then they'd started chatting to famous DJ Carl Cox, who of course now lives in Australia, and how Carl had kind of invited them to his lavish country estate where he's got like a collection of vintage cars, and they thought it was all just like, drug talk or whatever. But then days later, Carl was like, come up to my place, and they all went up there, and this guy was just riding around in the back of some 1950s vintage car with Carl Cox driving and taking all these photos of himself. And I was just like, this is high quality chat. Like I'd talk to this guy under any circumstances. So yeah. And now the old system of going, which wasn't that long ago, in Australia, you'd call a cab company and they'd go, it's on the way to you. It's on the way. And you'd wait 20 minutes. You wouldn't know where it was. And then they'd say, we've got to charge you $8 to start with because it's after 7 p.m. or whatever. All that stuff's gone. But
show sponsors. Come on. Uber, Garmin, Canva.
Yeah. Canva, Uber, Garmin.
We want. Speaking of Uber, we would just like more companies that are bankrolled by Saudi sovereign wealth funds, please. So
ideally, yeah.
So please, we'll start with Uber, and then any Saudi, and maybe just like the Saudi board of tourism.
Uber and ExxonMobil. That'll be show sponsors.
We just want to say this week's episode of Don't Praise the Machine is brought to you by Raytheon, keeping America's interests front and center.
Yeah. Al, I've got a little splug about Lockheed Martin. I don't know if you've heard what they've been up to.
A little mom and pop outfit that are really battling out there for the little guy. It's a real story.
Yeah, that's right.
Of small business success in the United States. John, I want to say this has been one of the greatest podcasts we've ever done. And also, what do you think? What do you say? Yep, definitely.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say the best far and away. And if you disagree, let us know. hello@dptm.org.
Before we go, why don't you tell everybody how I look on screen today?
Yeah, I must tell you that when you earlier were dispensing Dutchie's hot tips, normally I I attribute some, but not a great deal of weight to them as life advice. But now you're coming through to me in 4K digital surround sound, and I'm thinking, this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about. I'm writing it all
the trick,
down.
Isn't it? That if you actually just up the production quality, people give you more authority. So for people who aren't on the YouTube stream, this is the first podcast that I've done with the new camera setup, which John will be mirroring so soon. I can't wait until.
But it's nice to contrast. You can really see. I'm working with some tech here, some lights.
You've got the light. You've got the light sorted.
I've got the light. Yeah.
But wait until that light hits the lens of a Sigma 16mm f1.4 lens that's hitting. That light's gone straight into the sensor, the cropped sensor on a Sony ZV-E10. And I can't wait for the session that we have where I sit with you and I have to go through all of the settings on the Sony ZV-E10 and then have you navigate all the menus. There's so many menus and things to go into, and it'll be like, okay, John, tab 1, page 1, automatic focus mode, select, and then we'll have to mirror all of the settings. Or maybe I can even send. I wonder if I can send presets. That would be very helpful as well.
I'll keep accidentally just restoring factory settings and going. Oh no! Somehow
it's out of batteries. How do you make it have more batteries? Does yours have more? Does yours have more batteries? That's how you'll use. Have you got the one that doesn't turn on? Does yours?
My lens is cracked.
How do you make it so the lens isn't cracked? Look at this. Look at me. One of the things I love about this, after struggling with focus so much on my phone webcam, this thing knows. Again, talking about the rise of the computers, this thing knows it knows that this face is a face, and so it's been told in the been told in the settings, focus on so you can see, John, how my face stays in focus
as the primary
and
object.
My hand, it knows not to focus on my hand.
That's beautiful.
And that's what I've been dreaming of.
Do you think it sometimes wishes that it could focus on what it wanted? Is that intelligent, the technology?
If we allow it to focus on what it wants, we're all dead.
Yeah, that's right.
We desperately need all these fucking things to focus on what we want, or it's curtains for humanity.
It's fucking Skynet.
All right, I want to say what a great episode this has been. Episode number. Oh, I don't even think I said the number. Is it 155? It's 155 this week, isn't it?
155.
Episode number 155 of Don't Praise the Machine. My name's been Alexander Holland. As always, I'm sat digitally across from my number one pod partner, John Maloney. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into this episode. We'll be back next Tuesday. We are every single week. Don't Praise the Machine, the podcast, and we can't wait to see you next week.
At the podcast.